Good evening, everybody. This is Spencer Keck with the Hillbilly Think Tank, and I am coming at you live from Hardin County, Kentucky, y'all. I'm the educated hillbilly, and no, that is not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. There have been erudite, educated, emancipated hillbillies run around these parts ever since my family came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone. And ever since we came through that gap, we have been dedicating ourselves to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because we know that that's what makes it all worthwhile. That's why we came through that gap. That's why we've been serving with honor for our nation ever since we came to this country. Well, y'all, it is Red Friday, and that means remember everyone deployed Friday. So I am remembering everyone deployed since I deployed so much of my life. I missed so many Christmases, birthdays, Thanksgivings, other holidays while I was deployed. And I feel for anyone else that has to do that. And right now we know that there are quite a few people that are, quite a few servicemen and women that are deployed, and we wish them nothing but the best. And I am absolutely remembering them day in, day out. But we also know that the Donald Trump Department of Defense, well, Department of War, they want us to call it, but I'm hoping we don't go to war, so I'm not going to call it that. They need more servicemen and women. Like we reported before, they've raised the age that you can join you can join in your 40s now. Up from 35 for some branches, up from 32 for others, now up to 42 or more, depending on what you decide you want to do. So I'm here tonight to talk about, when I joined, there were certain things I was promised that if I served, I would be taken care of, have taken care of for me later in life. One of those is healthcare. You know, my dad served in Vietnam, suffered from Agent Orange, got cancer from it twice, like I've said here before, died from it only a little more than a year after he had found my brother dead in the closet, brother that had lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan less than 5 years before that. So service means a lot to me. Risking your life for this nation of ours means the world to me. So if we're being told that we need now our sons and daughters to join, since I am past that joining age, and after doing over 20 years in the military, I'm really not inclined to try to get them to let me join right now, no matter how much Captain Bone Spurs wants more of us to go back in, and they're allowing, folks with prior service to come on back in. But at the same time, they're doing this. They're slashing the benefits for those of us that were promised if we sacrificed limbs, body, mind, spirit, we'd always be taken care of by this great nation, that our great nation would thank us for our service by never letting us or our family starve or go homeless or go without medical care. And yet, what did this buffoon do? When they let Doge go ramrodding and run around the VA with Doge, like a bull in a china shop, they wrecked the place that I get my essential health care from. The place that's keeping me from falling into so much brokenness that I can't be a useful citizen anymore. So as they just plead for more people to join, try to get prior service folks to come on back in on active duty again, we got to ask ourselves, are we going to make sure that they take care of us veterans when we come back off of active duty? They've done a piss poor job in this administration, and they're making it worse. And it doesn't have to be this way. We were getting to the point we needed to be from the time that I started working the VA after I retired from the military, from 2015, 2016 especially, and forward. We just incrementally, with large increments, kept getting better and better and better until this last year. Actually, since January of 2025, when Doge started running amok in the VA. And, it doesn't get headlines in the news, but this is actually not helping recruiting efforts when the folks that would join, which are folks like me, I joined because my dad had been in the military, his dad had been in the military, his dad had been in the military, his dad had been in the military, and a lot of us have this inclination to serve the nation just like our fathers did. And yet, this is what's going to happen.
This is a new tool built by Common Defense Fund. It pulls directly from the VA's own data. You can go all the way down to your district, find out which facilities in your area that the VA has cut staffing to, even though most critical job positions are in need. The VA cut 40,000 jobs last year. If you haven't read the Blumenthal report, go fucking read it. It's scary. Go fucking read it. If you care about your benefits as a veteran, go fucking read it. Not only is that directly affecting us as patients of the VA, it's affecting veteran workers. 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 workers at the VA are veterans. Do the math on that. 40,000 last year. The VA is touting this massive budget, right? Biggest budget ever. What they're neglecting to mention is they're also going to be setting the record for money sent to community care into the private medical field. So they don't have money to keep doctors and nurses, psychologists, social workers at the VA. They don't have money for that. They're making cuts to positions that are already in dire fucking need, but they have money to send into the private medical field. If you think getting care now is hard, wait until you're having to fight insurance companies because they want to privatize the VA completely. They've made it explicitly clear. How much money are the corporations missing out on because we go through the government as veterans? Think about it. Go check out that tool. I have it at the top of my link tree. My average wait time for mental health in my area is 24 days, but I guarantee that number is not right. I guarantee that number is low. Go to the tool, find your district, find your VA facility. Let me know what it says for mental health wait time. Let's see if we can debunk the VA 17 days. Although that 17 days was under Biden, and I can believe that because when I got mental health under Biden, it was quick. Under Trump, I had to do a congressional inquiry. This is a new tool built by Common.
So I can attest to the veracity of that because when I worked for the VA, it was at first under President Obama. When President Obama came into office, he put Shuskin in charge of the VA healthcare. This before Shuskin moved up in the next administration to being in charge of all the VA. But when he was in charge of VA healthcare, he mandated that VA doctors go from seeing only 6 to 8 patients per day to 10 to 12 with an additional 2 patients per day set aside for emergency or acute care patients. That drastically helped us. It pissed off a lot of lazy providers, but it helped the vets. And the lazy providers end up departing the VA, and the providers that stayed and the ones they hired on understood they were going to be there because they cared for veterans. And I was getting some of the best care once that change happened. And I was working at the VA at the time. And like he's talking about, once the change occurred and the presidential administration changed under Biden, I had to start helping veterans do congressional inquiries. I was living in Montana at the time, and I would have to get them to call Senator Tester, who actually gave a damn about veterans, in order to get the care they needed. Before that, it wasn't like that. So, why am I saying this? Well, here in Hardin County, we know that we have the largest per capita population of veterans in this state. One of the largest per capita populations of veterans in the whole nation. So this affects us a lot. When I get my care at the VA, especially my specialty care providers, they are overtaxed, overburdened. I've got one of the most amazing nurse practitioners helping me in specialty care, and she's not getting the bonuses she should be getting, and she works harder than the doctors that are around her. In my opinion, provides better care, and yet because of Doge, she's not getting the bonuses she needs, even though she works more hours than the doctors that do the exact same job that she does, or she does the exact same job they do. But because she's a nurse practitioner, they cut her bonuses in order to pay the doctors. And that's not right. And it, like he said, all these cuts that they did have hurt us veterans. And it's all because the guardians of the pedophile, they want to make the VA privatized. They don't want it to be the program that we got right now. They want to help out private sources, which suck up way more money for the jobs that they do. And I am very satisfied with the care I get at the VA. I've only had I retired in 2014. I've only had personally one case of one physician assistant at an ER in Montana that I was dissatisfied with. Otherwise, I've had nothing but great care. And if I know I'm being assigned to a doctor that doesn't have a good reputation, I request another one and I make sure I get great care. But that's going to be a lot harder now that there aren't enough doctors. So, also in similar news, we're saying that we are going to need to send our sons, like I was talking about earlier, to the military. Well, many of us combat vets that did a full career, we're not really down with this sickness. We're not down with sending our kids off to have the same type of experiences that we suffered through. I'm so proud to have served. And in the past, I would have been like, yeah, son, join. Get the experience. The life experience that I got from the military is incredible. The ability to work with people from all walks of life, many different places, to travel the world and actually get a real education in humanity. I got that from the military, and I want it for anybody. I teach, and previously I would have told my students, yeah, join if you want to. It really changed my life, made me a better person. But there also was a cost to my service. And I ask now, any time we want to send the military out, is it worth the cost to the families of the service members? Is it worth the cost in illnesses to the veteran? Is the mission really worth it for everyone involved and for everyone in the nation? Or is there just going to be a whole bunch of money made off of it by opportunists and by contractors? That's what I ask. So that's my question right now. All right, before I go on, let me just see who I got on there tonight. Looks like we've got the ghost of John Brown. Welcome, one of my favorite guests. He's saying the Epstein class won't be satisfied until every aspect of the government is privatized. And that's exactly it. And that is absolute horse shit. And you know, if you're upset by my use of that word, well, go on ahead, join up in the military, and earn your right to say that I shouldn't say that about crappy missions that we can send our kids off to. So let's look at a recent amazing story that happened to one of the veterans of our current endeavors overseas. You may have heard that there's some insider trading going on, and it's a little bit crazy of a story, but it's, not like we haven't heard similar stories going on right now in, this administration and ones before it. But this involves a military member. So we've definitely got to keep our eye on it. So, in the midst of an absolutely abysmal approval ratings, the bright minds of the Trump administration have decided that instead of arresting literally anyone from the Epstein files, that they decided to arrest a shooter for the Maduro raid who allegedly did what Congress, the White House, and countless ghouls in the Trump family orbit are doing daily. Brilliant. So if you haven't heard, one of the Green Berets has been arrested for placing a bet on the raid. They're calling it insider trading because he knew what the outcome was going to be. Basically, he knew how successful they were going to be, and he placed a bet on it. He made, I think it was $400,000. The interesting thing is, it was reported all along in this Iranian deal that Don Jr. is doing the same type of betting. Don Jr. actually owns a large share of that company that places bets on this type of stuff. He's on the board of directors. And yet, the Department of Justice of this regime, Captain Bonespur's regime, decided to arrest a Green Beret for doing exactly what his son's been doing and what the whole White House and the White House family's been doing. Yeah, this is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Sell me something else. So again, special operations soldier invoked in the Maduro capture, arrested for making $400,000 on the Maduro poly market bet. All right. So, yeah. Am I saying that I support him for doing that? Not saying that, but I'm also not saying that, hey, this is just crazy, because he's doing exactly what we know Trump's son did before the Iran war. His youngest son was given 50 mil to invest into the global petroleum market. and he's made a killing.
This is a new tool.
So, yeah. Now, interesting thing too, at the same time that we're trying to get all these young folks and old veterans to, get in the military, the European Union leaders are discussing mutual assistance pact as they see that there is doubt about NATO staying afloat. And the Trump regime is actually planning, emails have revealed this, to try and oust Spain from NATO because Spain says, hey, you can't use our bases to launch attacks on Iran. They don't want to get tangled in a war of choice. So, who wants their kids to join the military when our U.S. military is losing allies by the minute because our Captain Bone Spurs chooses to alienate us from our own allies from NATO? So the Pentagon email floats suspending Spain from NATO and other steps over the Iran rift, sources say. So this is just absolute insanity. Of course, the U.S. on its own can't unilaterally, as far as I know, suspend someone from NATO, but this is doing nothing but sending the wrong signals while we're at war. We're sending so many wrong signals during this war that, I can't believe no one else is up in arms over this. We have fired so many people mid-war from the Pentagon, from leadership. I have no love at all for recently fired Secretary of the Navy Phelan, because in my opinion, he's a felon. He's one of the Epstein Island bunch. He's on the flight logs. And yet, it's just amazing to me that while our Navy is engaged in serious operations in the Strait of Hormuz, and probably even still off the coast of Venezuela, here we go, sending a message to Iran that we have no leadership in the Navy. Now, wow. Is anyone else as blown away as I am, or is it just me? So, we are firing folks left and right, telling the world, telling our enemies that we don't have anything under control in our military.
The breaking news, the Secretary of the U.S. Navy is out as Trump's war with Iran enters day 54. The surprise announcement coming just moments ago from the Pentagon, multiple sources telling CNN that there were tensions for months between John Phelan and the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Phelan was then told at this moment during the war, resign or be fired. And I mentioned during the war. I mean, this is a major move at a shocking time. This is the Secretary of the Navy, and the U.S. Navy right now has 15 ships in the Middle East, with most enforcing the biggest blockade by the United States since World War II. Phelan's sudden departure coming as it comes as we have new video tonight from Iranian state media purportedly showing soldiers seizing container ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Kristen, what are you learning? Obviously, as we said, you think about the scale of this blockade and what the United States Navy is doing right now. Suddenly, the Secretary of the Navy out with a resign or be fired.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously not good for the Secretary of the Navy. And we're learning some new reporting. You mentioned some of this, which is this idea that there was tension between Pete Hegseth and Phelan. A lot of it stemming from Hegseth wanting him to be quicker, thinking it was too slow on ship reform. But there's another part of this that I think is key. And this is what is always key in a Trump White House, which is proximity to power. And the reason being that Hegseth was annoyed by Phelan because Phelan would go directly to President Trump. Now, remember this, Phelan was not somebody with military experience. He was a donor. He and his wife had raised millions of dollars for President Trump. He had a personal relationship with President Trump. And in Trump's White House, even the top branches of government, the top cabinet officials know that the closer you are in the direct line to Donald Trump, that gives you all of the power. So Hegseth felt like Phelan was going around him, having these direct conversations with President Trump. Now, we're still not entirely sure what option that Phelan went with, whether he resigned or was fired. But of course, we know now he was ousted after these personal tensions amid this ongoing war where the Navy is a central component.
The Navy is a central component is an understatement because the United States Marines, who I serve with in combat and in other combatant and non-combatant situations over the course of my career as a hospital corpsman, because the Marines are part of the Department of the Navy. They are the infantry of the Navy. So this is a person who is in charge of the Navy and Marine Corps. And there are thousands of Marines on those ships waiting for the notice that they're going to hit the shoreline. And we do this. We are sending nothing but signals of chaos and weakness. And, yes, I am upset about this war, but this is why. It wasn't explained to us why it is so necessary and why the investment of lives of Americans are needed. It didn't go through Congress like the Constitution said it's supposed to, and it is being run in a complete shambles. Now, like I said, I am not the only veteran who feels that way. Plenty of much more conservative veterans than myself feel the exact same way. Some very heavy hitters. So if you have never heard of Mike Ritland, he is, one of the heavy hitters from the military. He's got a podcast called the Mic Drop Podcast, and he's going to talk with another veteran who was also an Army Ranger, and they're going to discuss their feelings on sending their kids to this war. So they break down some of the history that we've had with Iran and what the sentiment is going to be if we go over there again, invading with our Navy and Marine Corps and Army. So this is what we're up against. This is the sentiment in Iran that we're going to be up against.
Am I willing to send my children to war fighting? Everything that we know and that we cherish is on the line right now, and we have to be the people that step up and defend what we believe to be true. Iranian Air 655, civilian airline from Tehran to Dubai, with like 300 women and children on it. A U.S. destroyer shot it out of the sky. One of our naval boats shot a civilian airliner out of the sky and killed everybody on board. Would I send my children to Iran? The answer is no. Every soldier that doesn't come home, their family is forever changed. And both you and I have plenty of friends that have experienced that with our friends. Yeah. But here's the thing that this is what I've landed on as a man, because.
So that's two heavy hitters with two long careers between them, saying the exact same thing that I'm saying. And I love serving. God, I miss the adventure. I miss the travel. I miss the camaraderie. But there is a price for all of it. And to send our young men and women over to this conflict without real allies that are sustainable and that are part of our longest ally in history, ally structure in history, NATO. None of our NATO allies are involved in this. We don't even have an alliance pact and agreement with our so-called ally that got us into this conflict. Now, there are other entities besides our greatest ally that we're in this thing with. There are other countries that pulled us into this too. We know Saudi Arabia did. We know the UAE was involved. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, all involved. Well, now our great leader, Captain Bone Spurs, has decided we need to give away some more money, just like we did to Argentina, like we've been doing to Israel. We need to give away a whole bunch more money to one of these groups. So Captain Bone Spurs is considering an interest-free financial bailout for the United Arab Emirates. This place has more millionaires per capita than any other place in the world. Believe me, I've been there. I was there in the first Gulf War, 1990 to 91. I've been there. I know this place. I've passed through there and other deployments. This is absolute ludicrous. And yet, is this being played on the major news networks? The fact we're going to hand out an interest-free financial bailout for the place that has the most oil barons in the world besides Texas and other places out west in the U.S. Wow. Here we go. The hits just keep on coming. So this is what the commander-in-chief, if you want to call Captain Bone Spurs that, I refuse to. This is his plan for taxpayers' money, in addition to another endless war. So, what is he saying about the ceasefire with Iran? This extended war. What is he saying right now? Is he going to do his best to get us out of it? I just hope he actually claims victory and brings everybody home. Let's just give him that. Let's just all pat him on the back, say, yeah, you did it. You're right. Great. Come up with some medal to give him so we can bring everybody home. But that's looking like it's not very likely to happen because he says he does not want to extend the ceasefire with Iran. What more can we do? I don't know of any good Trump whisperer. I don't know that any exist in this time around in 47. There might have been some here and there in 45, but they didn't last long. I don't see any Trump whisperers left. And like we just saw in that last report, Secretary Phelan, no military experience, no association even with the military, but he got his position because he was a huge donor to Captain Bone Spurs. But even he's gone now. If he was a Trump whisperer, or if he had any chance of being, he's gone, thanks to Whiskey Pete Keg's breath. So, y'all, there's only so much of this that our nation can take. Now, one last final thought. You just saw what one of the veterans said about Flight 655, which we blew out of the air and killed 300 some Iranians on a flight to another location in the Middle East. You know, that wound has been festering for years. And the way you keep wounds like that from festering used to be by having USAID actually do stuff for us and for our reputation around the world. When I say do stuff, that, you know, things like fighting HIV in Africa, fighting to take vaccinations, just simple cures for diseases, to developing nations so that those nations thrive, think of us as their friend, want to be allied with us. And, you know, if we ever did do something wrong in the past, USAID was there to help smooth over our relations with them. Now, every time I deployed in my last few years in the military, when I went to places like Africa, I noticed we'd go in, we'd paint old schools, put fresh coats of paint on their old schools to try to help, you know, build relationships as we waved our flag. But we were always noticed there were two other major interest groups in those nations we'd wave the flag in when we did our West Coast of Africa tour. And one of those entities was Kellogg, Brown and Brute. And if you don't remember that, that's Halliburton's subsidiary. So Halliburton and Kellogg, Brown and Root were in almost every single place we went to go wave the flag and paint old schools. The other entity that was there, the other interest group that was in each of those nations in Africa that we went to, was China. China wasn't painting old schools as they waved their flag. They were building brand new schools, brand new hospitals, brand new roads and infrastructure for every single one of those nations. And we gripe about USAID. USAID, the amount of money that it spent was so minuscule in relation or relatively speaking to the work that it did of providing goodwill for us, which helps us not to go and have to, you know, convince people by gunpoint to be our ally or to do what we want. And yet, since AID was destroyed by this man, Elon Musk, 518,428 children have died, preventable deaths, since USAID was dismantled. How many people do you think now are our enemies after that many kids died due to this freaking idiot being evil? And the only reason he did that was because USAID was reporting on his misdeeds overseas and reporting that to the Inspector General, which was then in return investigating him. That's what it was all about. An estimate from the Boston University's epidemiologist, Dr. Brooks Nichols, who tracks the data in real time. Her dashboard also estimates there have been 262,915 adult deaths, as well as more than 9.5 million additional cases of malaria. Many of these deaths are associated with disruption to vaccination efforts, food distribution, and access to basic medical care. One study from The Lancet last year predicted that the cuts could lead to 14 million additional deaths by 2030, including 4.5 million children under the age of 5. The cuts to USAID programs were led by Elon Musk's Doge initiative and backed by Captain Bone Spurs and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And again, as this person points out, let's don't forget that the entire cost of USAID was less than the cost of the first day of bombing Iran. So this guy that everybody thinks is a freaking genius, he's not a genius. People that have his disorder actually are low threshold geniuses. They're not full-blown geniuses. They're lower threshold of IQ. They're right above the average or the high average, but they're not into full-blown genius level. He is someone who has glommed off of other folks in his whole history of enterprises when he makes money. He goes in and takes other people's ideas and takes credit. He's done that over and over and over. So from when he started, PayPal, along with another nefarious South African. And yeah, don't need to go into his history except to say that this is evil. He's evil. And now we're creating more enemies around the globe. So, it was a small price to pay for at least a little bit of goodwill worldwide. And the amount of money that China is spending on building allies dwarfs the amount that we spent on USAID. They don't need to roll their militaries into other countries to get their way. They're welcomed with open arms since they build infrastructure everywhere they go. Brand new infrastructure that nations didn't have before they went in there. And was Kellogg, Brown and Root doing any of that in Halliburton? Nope. They were there to extract resources. And like I said, when our ship went in and our other, deployments, we just painted over old buildings and waved our flag and acted like we were the greatest thing in the world. And we were often welcomed, or everywhere we went, welcomed with open arms. I was amazed, especially since I knew that many of those nations we went to, we had invested heavily in their 30-year, 20-year, 15-year civil wars, depending on which ones we went to. We went to Congo, went to Sierra Leone, many other places. So I'm mentioning this, and how is it connected to Kentucky and Hardin County? It's connected big time because we're all, not all, but a lot of us here are veterans or know veterans that we care about deeply or, have family members that are. And there are going to be more of us if this conflict blows out of control. And what are we doing to keep from making more enemies? Nothing right now. Nothing at all. And so again, do I want to send my kids to the military after loving most of my time there? I had some bad experiences too, but man, it really changed my life and I have benefited from everything that I've been given by my nation since I served. But do I wish the ill effects of it on anyone else if we're not getting more for our investment than we're, sacrificing? No. All right. Hey, we got Coffee Cats on here tonight. Coffee Cat says we've got to get rid of the Epstein class. Absolutely. That's what this show is all about. And that's what my campaign for magistrate here in District 3 of Hardin County is all about. We've got to get folks in there, like we've got a lot of candidates right now running that are about service to this community, about making sure we stand united, not divided, so we don't fall. All right. Coffee Cat says, legally, of course. Goes to John Brown back. Wonder what the kickback is to the Trump family and the Epstein class. Absolutely. Goes to John Brown for the bailout to the to the United Arab Emirates, so the UAE. Yeah. So I too wonder what the kickback is. I mean, we know that Qatar gave this president an very expensive jet, which he doesn't plan on giving back after it's converted to be Air Force One. He plans on taking it with him once he, leaves the White House, if he ever leaves. All right. So, Copycat says it is so very sad that they handled USAID the way they did. You're right to call it evil. Yeah, absolutely evil and deplorable. Goes to John Brown. Don't forget about the shadow president, Russ Vought's hand in the USAID cuts. He doesn't get nearly the attention he deserves for the things that have happened in all aspects of our government. Well, I'll need to give that one a little more attention. Since, Pallinger and Musk have been high on my radar. All right, y'all. Again, it's all back to we've got so many veterans here in this place, and so many of us have sacrificed more than most Americans are ever willing to. And we're willing to do that. We've been willing to do that for generation after generation. I lost my dad and my brother to the effects of, my dad to Vietnam. After Vietnam, Vietnam killed him. Years later, still killed him. My brother, it didn't take as long for Afghanistan to kill him. And my dad was the one, like I said, who found him in the closet, dead. That's a big sacrifice. And I'm trying not to break down in tears here. But, if we're going to call for that sacrifice, we need to see clearly laid out by a true leader what it's for, why we're doing it, and why it's worth the life of our children. I say I'm past the age of going back. And I am now teaching public school, and I'm teaching kids that are interested and want to join, and I don't want to tell them not to, but I also want to make sure that when they go, it's for a real good reason if they have to make that ultimate sacrifice. So again, this county needs every veteran that lives here and that's going to be coming now and retiring here and living here and staying here. We need to know that anything that they're asked to do to sacrifice for this nation, that it's absolutely worth the cost. That it isn't just to enrich the Epstein class, that it's not just for the whims of our greatest ally. And I don't mean NATO, because NATO is not asking us to do this at all. All right, y'all. Let's remember, here in Hardin County, we know that Kentucky's motto, united we stand, divided we fall, is not just a little catchphrase. That is the absolute, epitome of how we maintain life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In order to do that, we can't be divided by the Epstein class. It can't be them against us. We need real justice, not just us, like the Epstein class likes to say, just them. Needs to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So like and subscribe, if you would please, to this channel. And more importantly, vote for me in November. And next month, when it comes time to decide who's going to be on your ticket, really look closely at the priorities of the candidates. Reconsider. Have I been voting for people in the past that don't have the interest of all Kentuckians being united? Remember those deployed overseas. Remember, everyone deployed overseas. It's Red Friday. Remember, everyone deployed Friday. They've made sacrifices up to this point, and they're still making sacrifices daily. And I hope none of them have to make any more of the ultimate sacrifices, as 13 already have. And there's hundreds others that have been wounded so far. That's a big sacrifice. All right, y'all. Have a blessed weekend. Hopefully, you can keep your powder dry and your guns clean. Let's give democracy everything we've got. Have an awesome one, and hug your kids tight. Make sure that they're ready for what's coming and what they need to do to also save democracy.
He grew.